You are listening to The Learning Factory. Please do not resist.
Okay, welcome to the Learning Factory podcast. You're going to be learning how to be a better design teacher over the next insert number of minutes here that we get out of this first episode. The whole point of this is that we have discovered that there's loads of education podcasts out there, but none of them are interesting to listen to, with the exception of the ones done by people we know. Sorry.
I think we need to put a caveat on that, Dave, that we're using the term educational podcast very loosely here. Probably more a bit of a real world podcast. Basically, we talk about our experiences teaching MYP Design, what we've fucked up and what's worked well, and this, not the podcast you play for your students in class.
No, I would not be sending this to my students. I probably wouldn't even send this to my colleagues, but until I knew them very, very well. What have we messed up and how to avoid messing up in similar ways? I think for the first podcast, I think I had the brainwave do the design cycle very quickly and sort of do the podcast as a design cycle, if that makes any sense.
So where are we going to start?
Oh, the question, where do we start? Do we start where the IB told us to at A1, or do we mix it up? And
let's do what any new teacher to design might do, and jump in at A1 and feel the need to move along.
Okay, cool. So for those of us who don't know, the section or criteria, the design problem you're trying to solve.
Justify the need for a solution to a problem.
Justifying the need for a solution to a problem. So what's the problem that we're trying to solve in this situation, in this podcast?
You and I have been talking for a while, having been in situations where we're new to MYP Design, new to a school that may not have an established design program, and trying to get some ideas, whether you're the only design teacher in the school, or you're all new. But trying to find some practical help out there, and when we mean practical help, we're meaning just how it is. We don't, and let's make it clear: we're not here. We're not pushing big words that they use in university level words, like
marmalade and corrugated iron. And
I think if you wanted to put, like, if you're having your technical skills and you're leveraging high, medium and low technical skills, and if technical skills were words, we probably would never get above low or medium words.
Nothing with 3 syllables or above.
If you stumbled across this podcast and you're thinking about some, pedagogy and metacognition and whatnot, you may as well just turn it off now. But if you want some practical advice, what sometimes works well and what fails often, keep listening.
I remember being first year teacher in IB, and what I had for 4 or 5 years teaching overall, and reading the design guide and going, what do they actually want me to do? It took a few weeks just for somebody to say, I think it was actually you said to me, you only have to do what's in the grey boxes. They're like the big important things. Do what's in the grey boxes and you'll be fine.
It's I look at it really. It's very much like riding a bike. There's lots of different bikes out there you can ride, and you probably fall off a few times. And just because you've been able to ride one bike doesn't mean you can ride the next bike you get on.
Yeah, it's almost like the design cycle was intended for that. You can go round and round and round and round. Oh, that's a metaphor, isn't it?
I guess the facilities and the resources you have determine some of the things you can make, but they don't limit the success that you can have with the kids.
Yeah, you can do design thinking with a pen and a piece of paper and maybe a bit of blue tack or whatever, just some simple stuff. You don't need all bells and whistles. And I think we'll probably get to that in a later podcast about, like, what do you really need to do and what do you need to have are 2 separate things, really. You're looking at design thinking. Yeah.
So we've identified what a problem is, why a solution's needed, because people need practical advice. Pumping my tyres up a bit there. what are some of the research questions that we might ask? Okay, why do we feel that this is a problem?
Like if the problem is like what do people do day one in design? You've been shoved into a design room, given the guide, printed out, and gone, right, you're teaching, off you go. That's the first question is, all right, what am I doing? What's the purpose, the overall goal, and what do I have? So some of the questions are primary research, what's in front of me, what resources do I have, what am I going to do next on day one?
I guess one of the key things I'd want to make sure I'm asking too is, okay, I've got to cover this, I've got to go through these 4 objectives, I've got these 16 strands I've got to cover. So they're non-negotiables. I've got to get through those. But the other non-negotiable is I want the kids to enjoy it. I don't want it to be a writing subject.
Yeah, well, that's a whole different discussion, isn't it? Like about writing about design versus actually designing.
Yeah, but that's one of my research questions. I'll put that in there.
I think a big one is as well, like you said, you're going back to like I've got these things I need to cover. I think with other subjects you've got content. You know, you've got I need to do algebra and I need to do creative writing and I need to do this. But sometimes you walk into a design room, design department, and you kind of have to ask, well, what do they do here? Because it's different to the last school or it's completely different to other subjects. There mightn't be content really, especially if you're working internationally. You're not working within a national curriculum. That was one thing I struggled with.
Yeah, and I guess also too, you know, a lot of schools, they've got their standards that they're working with as well as their IB objectives and curriculum. So it's about making the two fit together. And from what I've seen, looking at different standards from around the world, that they're all very much asking for the same thing. It's just different sentence structure, really.
Yeah, you could pick if you really pick down on what they want you to do. It's just different words for the same question. Like, yeah, it's like even in Ireland. Well, shocker for everyone. I'm Irish. This podcast does not come with subtitles. It's very much skills based, but they're bringing in more about design thinking, process, stuff like that. It's becoming more in that way. I don't know what's design called in Australia? Is it called design?
Well, yeah, I think like it's design and technology or design technology. Look, I can't be too sure. I've been out of Australia for 11 years now, and I guess that's the other thing why we're talking about this, because often when you're thrown into MYP design, you may not actually have a background in design. Because unfortunately, a lot of the times it's sort of a bit of a timetable filler.
Big time
for the staffing, particularly for new schools and everything. So, obviously my background when I was working in Australia wasn't a design specialist. I taught a bit of humanities, as most teachers do. I taught a little bit of English because I had a linguistics background, and I taught. I stood at the front of a class with some disengaged grade 9 boys and sort of did some IT with them. We did a bit of metal work, that sort of stuff. So I really got thrown into design when I came overseas, and that's where my love of the subject came from. And obviously, Dave, your background is the polar opposite of mine.
Yeah, I'm specialist. I'm actually not though. I play that up a bit. I'm a metalwork teacher. That's my metalwork and design communication graphics, which is a lovely word for what everyone would call draftsmanship back in the day. So yeah, pencils and hammers and stuff. But yeah, like I had to learn design when I came overseas, rather than learning the hard skills. They were all ingrained in me, and it was very hard to tell kids, no, you're cutting that wrong, rather than going, oh, well, at least they're cutting something. That's pretty good. You're going to get kind of lamped out of your comfort zone, aren't you? You're going to be going, what am I doing?
For me, anyway, that was one of the benefits coming into design from not having that design, that background, where I was more focused on the process of going through the design cycle, as opposed to being finicky about the skills and ensuring that everything was correct. And I think there's a good balance with that. Having worked with, different teachers in my time overseas, some who were similar to me and others who came from industry first, and working with them, you can really get that balance in us about what's important for skills, but what's important about that conceptual understanding.
I think that's probably your perfect research question, isn't it? So what's the important thing I need to do, or what's the balance I strike between designing stuff and making stuff? And the kids are going to dictate that as well. They're going to be like, oh, we want to make stuff right now. And you kind of go, well, yeah, cool, that's fun. And I want to let you do that, but then I've got these other 15 criteria strands I need to get through as well. And how do I balance that? And how do I make those enjoyable and make them fun?
Yeah, and that's right. And it's about interpreting those strands as well. Often, like I said before, kids like design because they get to use their hands. It's not, if they wanted to write, I can stay in English and humanities. They don't have to come to design.
I was going to let you say that because you've got the English and humanities background. I wasn't going to shit all over the INS teachers. I was going to let you do that.
Yeah, but it's about and sometimes there's nothing wrong with reading the criteria exactly how they're written, right? And when you're learning yourself, yes, you probably will have a bit more writing because you're feeling that there's the pressure coming from your head of department who might be very experienced, or the MYP coordinator, or the fact that you've never been in MYP before and you're absolutely shitting bricks because no one's telling you exactly what you have to teach. So that's fine. But as you start to get more and more experience, you can then, as you're reading those strands, you can say, yeah, I can practicing doing this, doing different joints on scrap bits of wood. That's a part of your research. That fits into criterion A. You're doing primary research. So just, I guess, taking that leap of faith and backing yourself about what you actually want to do is a big thing.
Yeah, I think we get into that for a long time. Like, how do I MLA format cutting a piece of wood from my research plan? Because my head of department said that all research points have to be MLA formatted.
And ask your librarian how to reference that one. That'll keep them thinking for a bit. They'll be flicking through the Dewey Decimal System trying to find out where they got that from.
It's good. It's 2021. Like, librarians are looking for jobs these days, so keep them busy for a few hours. Actually, that's a good one. Actually, though,
what to do with all those spare index cards these days?
Let's make paper card houses, what we call them. I reckon it's good though. Actually, moving on swiftly to A3. It's like looking at what other people have done before.
Yes.
Like looking at what's out there. Because I reckon a lot of people. I've got a unicorn at the moment where kids are making stuff, and they're like, "Oh, how do I make a new pair of headphones?" And I was like, "You don't have to make a new pair. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Design's not about reinventing the wheel. Just ask Samsung and Apple. They're just putting different stickers on the same phone.
Yeah, that's invention. We're innovation. Change it.
Make it a tiny bit better, and you'll make millions, or you'll make a great design. So yeah, looking at what's already out there and not thinking that you have to reinvent that. So yeah, you mightn't agree with what your HOD is doing, or you mightn't necessarily know exactly how to make that product, but just having a look at it and seeing what you want to take from it is the main idea there. Like with the podcast, we're sitting down listening to a lot of podcasts, education or otherwise, and we're like, I like that. I'm going to take that little bit of somebody's podcast, and it's like, I don't like this about it. Yeah,
and a lot of it's too, right? It's come from, we had the benefit of team teaching together for a number of years, and a lot of the stuff we talked about was like, yeah, that would have been really bloody good if someone had have told me that right at the start. Yeah. Or shit, like, why didn't we think of doing it this way ages ago?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the whole point of going around the cycle a couple of times, isn't it? When you get back to that, you go, actually, no, I'm going to do it differently this time. And every time you teach something, it's going to be different, and hopefully it's going to be better. You are going to fuck it up the first time. You might only fuck it up a little bit. You think it went great, but the second time around, you're going to go, oh, that was actually a lot better. Or it wasn't. And you identify that. Like, that's the key thing for that sort of section, that criteria strand. He's like, okay, what went well? Or what's good? What's bad? What am I going to do better in my own design or next time? Or what?
So we're on to A4, where we're thinking about
we were just talking about writing, weren't we?
Yeah, we're on to A4, where we're thinking about our design brief. And this is, I guess, this is the one that causes the most confusion, angst, debate.
Well, for me, I'll tell you one thing is, anybody who's ever worked in the national curriculum system in England, in the UK, or any British school, this is your first thing. You're given the brief, or the teacher comes up with the brief and gives it to the students, and then they go and research. And this is what messed with my head for so long.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, and as teachers, this one's a bit of a mind fuck as well. I can only imagine what it's like for the kids. So getting your head around this is what's important. And I guess, I don't know, we've sort of talked about it, sort of breaking it down to your goal, who it's for, challenge you'll have, and how you know it's going to be successful.
Yeah, getting some rough sort of like idea of where you're going. Like what's your end goal? How do you know if you met that goal or not?
Dave, do I need to know what I'm going to create when I'm writing my design brief?
No. You need to know what problem you're going to solve, maybe, and even a general area of a problem. You'll end up finding things along the way that you're like, oh, actually, that's better. I'm going to move in that direction. The problem is, I suppose, then it's like balancing the amount of freedom you want to give students. Like if you give a lot of grade 6, 11-year-olds, go, yeah, make whatever you want. Go nuts. You're going to end up with a zoo. All right, so we've done the criteria. So we've written our goal. We know what we're doing. We know who we're doing it for. We know what's happening. We've done a bit of research. We've got an idea of what's happening.
It's an authentic task.
It is. Yeah, it's a real problem.
And for me to go against what I said and jump into some, teacher speak, it fits a grass model.
Oh yeah, goal, wall, something, and something. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, grasp. Oh, I've just hit my microphone. I'll have to edit that out in my squeaky chair. So anyway, the next section is section B, developing ideas. And this is where you have to grab the kids by the reins and go, no, we're not making stuff yet. We're still designing, because they already know what they're building, because they've written a really good design brief, haven't they?
On the third beep, the time will be B1. Beep, 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 beep.
B1's the specification. The hint is in the name, kids. Specific.
How have you found the best way to do specifications, Dave?
Oh, backwards. Backwards, always. Do them backwards.
Yeah. So
I usually get a product and you go, all right, what's the specification for that product?
So when you're grabbing one of your products, do you use one of the products that they've analysed in A3, where they've already got an understanding of it, they've already thought about it, they've got that knowledge, you're not throwing something new at them that then's going to take them 45 minutes of the 50-minute period to say, oh, yeah, good shout.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, maybe the older ones you might throw them a challenge. Also, if you get a range of stuff that's roughly similar, like you get like a pair of headphones, some AirPods, I don't know, a speaker, and you kind of go, well, these are all roughly the same thing, aren't they? And you go, what was the specification for all of them? And that makes it a nice general specification, so it doesn't narrow down their ideas later on. Yeah. Because you get these kids, and you get teachers as well who come in and go, okay, it must be blue. It must be 40 by 20 by 10 centimeters and X, Y, and Z. It must be made from plastic. Yeah. And you're like, well,
and that's the other thing too. Like, don't stress out. Like, if you're school, like if you're in a school that, use what you've got. The easiest thing, we're in a school. Everyone is sitting on something or holding something, or, look at chairs, look at tables, look at classrooms. Like, there's lots of different things that you can use that are serving the same purpose but are different. So utilize what's available, and even if that's completely different to what you're actually trying to do in the unit, at least it allows them to make that connection.
Well, you don't want to say exactly what you want in your specification. You're trying to go for a range, so you're giving yourself a bit of wiggle room. So like if you say like a chair, if you say like, oh, analyze the chair you're sitting on, like give me a specification for the chair you're sitting on, they're going to go, oh, well, it's for grade 7s because they're in grade 7. And you go, are they the only kids I teach? Like, oh, no, I teach grade 12s as well.
Yeah, and then you walk over and sit on it and say, hey, I'm not in grade 7.
So, yeah, they go, oh, actually, it's for people between the ages of X and Y. And you go, oh, okay, so now it's quite general. Now you've got a bit of wiggle room, don't you?
Yeah, and that's it. And chairs and tables are great because they're simple. Like, what's the key thing a table must have? Kids are like, oh, it needs to have 4 legs. Well, it doesn't actually, because the table that you're working at has got a single pedestal type, whatever it's called, in the middle. What does it have to have? And then they sort of get to, like, it needs to have a flat surface.
Yeah. But even if they say like, oh, it's got to be a level surface, you go, what about a drawing desk? You just like keep shooting their ideas down a little bit in a positive way, make them all feel good and warm and fuzzy. But yeah,
because that's when they say, well, there's tables that have a round surface, and that's where you say that's a sculpture. Go down to the art room.
Yeah, take your ideas and get out, and go be creative somewhere else. The developing ideas section is no place for creativity. Get out. We want specific specifications. And then some kid goes, is that the ocean beside America? And you go, all right, just wake up, come on.
Front loading for them is about the difference between something that's measurable and something that's opinion.
You always get kids who are like, oh, it's going to look cool.
Yeah.
And I was going like, all right, I'm 30 whatever years of age. What I think is cool and what you think are cool are two completely different things.
So that's important. And then moving on to
my favorite criteria strand.
Exactly, and this is where the magic happens.
We just opened the fridge in an episode of Cribs. Oh, that's gonna date this episode. Nobody remembers Cribs. Oh no.
B2, design ideas. This is where you can go to town and have as much fun. You can bring in as much detail as you want. And I guess what you're asking, as long as you're developing a range of feasible design ideas, you can have as much fun with this as you want. And I've found I can get a lot more out of the students now because I can be a lot more direct, I guess, with what I need from this. I know how to structure it up a lot more.
What do you mean by structure it up?
What I used to be able to do. So it's taking that time, about some terminology, so the difference between drawing and sketching, what thumbnails are, talking about wireframes, talking about when you're boxing. All that.
One of the big things, I suppose, is the structure. But I was always so confused when I came into MYP Design first. It was like, because in the British system and the Irish system, you do your initial ideas, and that's a whole section on its own, and then you do your developed ideas later on, with the annotations, with the material choices, exploded, wireframes, CAD drawings, all this kind of stuff. That's later on. Whereas in MYP Design, it's design ideas. And that can have a number of like subsections almost, with thumbnails, with stuff like that, yeah. Yeah,
and I remember going to, when I first started in MYP, going to a workshop, and the facilitator, she said, what I tell my kids with this, I tell them to think of, 2 or 3 ideas that they probably can, and an idea that is just out of the box. Doesn't matter if you can't do it, just going through that process. Because obviously when we jump down to justifying your choice, the chosen idea, you're not going to choose that because it's not feasible. But going through that process of that, taking that idea from your mind and getting it on the paper and making it so that someone else can actually understand what you're thinking and your thoughts, I think that's important, because you don't want to smash creativity as well. If you're in a school and you're, maybe you're just working with cardboard for material design, don't limit your kids on what they're thinking. They can, because
they can think in metal, they can think in plastic, even if you don't have it.
Maybe they're vacuum forming something. That's fine. It's not the most feasible design idea, so they're not going to choose it. But don't smash smash the creativity out of them because of circumstance.
Yeah, like if some kid says like, "Oh, I'd love to weld two pieces of metal together to make this product," and goes further down the line, you don't actually have to do that. For a prototype, you can get two plastic bottles and ask one of the grade 12s for his lighter and melt them together. There you go, same thing.
Or you just ask your teacher.
Yes, yeah, co-teacher, yeah. Any chance of a ciggy? No. Smoking's bad, kids.
That's right. They all vaping these days.
Well, even I'm in the situation now where the most sort of heavy material I'm working with is plastic. Maybe some softwood, some kind of plywood, stuff like that. So nothing too hectic. But it's good to go back to basics and see what you can actually do with cardboard and paper.
Yeah, that's right. You can have some great stuff.
Yeah, it's a bit confronting when you come to the creation stage later on. Be like, oh, I don't actually have that. But just having that knowledge that that's not the point. It's about being creative.
Because we don't want to smash the like my kids come home with unicorns and castles. It looks to me like a screwed up bit of paper, but it's a magical unicorn that shits cupcakes, and the other one is, a castle with a magical princess in it. We don't want to beat the creativity out of them.
Yeah, I've got a kid. She's like grade 8, and she makes herself a new crown every week out of paper to wear on Zoom calls in class. Just a new one, and it's like, oh yeah, amazing. Show us your new. Waste 10 minutes of the class. Show us your new crown. Let's have a look at that. How have you made that? How's it connected up in the back? Yeah.
So how would you structure? We're getting off topic now.
That would be like us.
And unicorns. No. So very, very quickly, how do you? And I don't know. Maybe we're getting off topic because we were going through the design cycle talking about this. So if this was B2 design ideas, give us a quick rundown on, for this product, what your ideas would have been.
What's this product? What am I making?
We're making a podcast.
Oh, shit. Sorry, I thought we were talking hypothetical crowns there for a second.
No.
Yeah, so design ideas, you go with like one person talking into a sock podcast. Then you go with two people having a conversation podcast. That sounds interesting. And then you go with like group discussion. You go recording in class maybe. And then you go way off and you go, what if I make a YouTube video talking into my terrible MacBook camera and just do that? Or video a class even. So there already I've got like 5 ideas. Pick the best few and develop them.
Yeah, and then you've got those other things, right? Which about the structure of the podcast too, right? And that's where you can come up with your different structures, whether it's a very formal, whether it's a Q&A type thing, whatever. And then this is where your specifications that you've come up with in B1 and your design ideas in B2 are helping you make that informed decision for B3, where you're justifying your decision. Yeah. And I think this is one of those key areas where when I was new to design, I ended up getting the kids to write a lot more than what they needed to write, because I would get them to check every design of those. They've come up with their thumbnails, they've come up with a range, they've got it down to 3 design ideas, and then I'd get them to justify each of those design ideas against the specifications.
And just check them like almost like checklist, every one of them.
Yeah, ticks and crosses and everything. But you don't need to do that, because when you actually are looking at that criteria, you're just justifying the chosen idea.
Yeah, I've definitely gone back and I remember like told the kid to put a red X or like just ignore an idea because it didn't fit all the specification points. And I've been like, that was stupid. You could have fixed it, but they could have fixed it to make it somewhat fit the criteria. They could have developed that into something good, but I've just stood on it and crushed it because I haven't thought about it, and I haven't known the criteria well enough, and I haven't known the flexibility within the criteria well enough. Like the Mr. IB superhero isn't going to zoom in through the window and tell me I'm wrong. I now have an image of like an IB based superhero in my head.
Yeah, and then so you've justified you're explaining why it's the best choice, and this is where it comes down to a number of reasons. it may not be the design idea that best fits the specifications, but it may be the design idea that best fits the resources and the facilities you've got at the school, or it's the best idea that fits the student's current skill level or within the range. And the other really important thing, you don't want a kid to limit themselves with the design idea they come up with when it comes to criterion C, and they're only showing low technical skills, because then they've shot themselves in the foot. And that's not fair on them, because you as the teacher should have that foresight to be able to okay, they still need to have that opportunity to achieve a level 8 for C2. I need to make sure that they understand that back here in criteria B, so that they're not limiting themselves.
Yeah, true. Actually, yeah. I think the big thing is almost like pretending you're in a perfect world at this stage. You're like, anything is possible in D2. Like, you can get something made if your school doesn't have a 3D printer, you can 3D print that, or you don't have any metalworking equipment, and they want to make something massive. Yeah, you can make a metal frame. Just put the ideas forward. We'll work around that later in planning, and you can always build a prototype. You don't have to build the actual thing.
And that's the other thing too. I know I'm jumping ahead, but it goes back to that last comment about technical skills and what you classify as high, medium, and low. As a school, you need to classify that. You as a department or as an individual, you need to come up with your list of what you see as high, medium, and low skills for what the kids can actually achieve where you are. One school might say, arc welding with perfect welds is a high skill, but a school that doesn't have those facilities, can't do that. Maybe it's having similar to a weld, but it's with a glue gun.
They've made a solid connection, and they've thought about the forces that are acting on that piece. They're not going to put 10 kilograms weight on it like you would a metal joint, but they're going to put an equivalent force as a test. But I've gone ahead to test now, haven't I?
So,
but the thing is,
and that's the thing. That's the vagueness of the criteria, but that's the beauty of the criteria. That for every school in the world that has decided we're going to offer MYP and we're going to offer MYP Design, they can use that same criteria. So it's a blessing and a curse.
That's the important thing I think we need to remember as well. Like, the school doesn't need software design. Doesn't really. It needs to do something like it. So if you're talking about product design, like making stuff, they can go, do something cheaper on computers. So you kind of need to.
Yeah. So let's do.
Yeah. So this is pretty very product design focused line of thinking.
That's it. And I guess that's where you find around the world a lot more digital design programs, because it's a lot easier to run. From an international school perspective, which are essentially private schools, fee-paying schools, lots of them will have one-to-one programs, so that's quite easy. A lot of them will have the facilities for product design as well. But then, government schools, state-run schools in various countries around the world, they're often decisions made by governments where, okay, we're all going to adopt the MYP, but schools are very different in what they can offer. So that's where, maybe they've got one computer lab that in the school and they can use digital, but then also you've got schools that don't have those facilities. They don't have IT within a school, but you've still got that ability to be able to. That's where you can run a product design unit.
Yeah. I think that's probably like a bigger issue. Is like, what can you do with the resources you have?
B4.
Did we do B3? We did.
We better go back to that because we got off topic a bit. Where you're justifying your design choice. So you're talking about your skills, your facilities, basically which design idea you have the best chance of succeeding with. That's usually your best design, and that's the one you justify. And I think it's important too, particularly for the older years, like MYP 4 and 5, if they've got the ability to go through their design ideas with their client, that adds that next dimension to justifying the choice of that design idea. Because you may think this product's perfect, this really meets it, but if your client says, I actually like this one because I'm actually I much prefer geometric shapes, I forgot to tell you that, then go with that. Because the beauty of design, it's a cycle. It's not a line. So you can go back and you can add in a design specification, must contain geometric shapes. Done.
Yeah. It's like that, especially in the upper years, they wait until the evaluation phase to get any feedback at all. And then they end up, say, showing it to another teacher or a parent or a friend or whatever else. And then they go, oh, X, Y, and Z. And then they get really deflated and they're like, oh, this is rubbish, I don't want to do this anymore. And you're like, well, you could have done that in the design phase and then made something really cool and you got great feedback. And you were able to make sort of maybe 2 versions of something because you've that skill level when you're in the upper years and so they can get that immediate feedback. But it's about instilling that confidence in the student to go and talk to someone. Actually get some feedback of someone now. Don't wait till later on.
Yeah.
And then you can use that feedback as a justification then. So B4.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing you just to jump back a little bit from B3 as well is when you're coming up with your specifications, you do need to be thinking about your testing methods that you're going to be using in D2.
This is actually funny. We keep jumping back and forth between the different Bs. And a kid said this to me not so long ago. He looked at the design cycle diagram and he said, there's arrows between the sections, like A, B, C, and D. And then there's that mess in the middle with all the arrows. And then he said, there's no arrows between the sections, the 16 sections on the edge. And I went, yeah, actually, you're right. Some of them depend on doing some first. Like you can't do justifying the design choice without having design ideas. There's nothing really saying, he was kind of thinking out loud, he's like, there's nothing really saying you can't develop design ideas before specification. Yes, naturally speaking, you can kind of do it, but you can make a few ideas and then go back from there.
Yeah, I think it's important that I find it's much easier to jump into B2 where you're coming up with your thumbnail ideas and those initial ideas, refining those, then going back to B1, coming up with your specs, and then jumping back into B2 and changing things.
Yeah, after you've decided what are the must-haves and the wants and the needs in B1. How do I develop my ideas now? Yeah. B2, B1, B2 again. Yeah. And then, so we've decided...
Because I think most in the real world, when people are coming up with an idea, they sketch up their idea. They don't sit there and say, I've got this idea, I'm just going to write out a list of specifications for it first. No, they sketch out an idea and then they say, oh, yeah, that's what it needs to have. These are the things. Now, I can change this up a bit, but, yeah, this is what's important. It needs to have this and this and this.
I wonder if you got an actual product designer on, professional product designer, really successful one, and asked them to have a look at the design cycle. Would they be like, oh, yeah, that's pretty much what I do, but in different ways? Or would they be like, no, that doesn't work at all?
Yeah, well, when you look at it, it's pretty simpler. It's simpler. That's why I'm not still teaching English, because I can't even fucking speak it. It's a pretty simple process, and it does match up with industry pretty well, where it's that whole think, make, break, repeat. Obviously, that repeat element of it is a bit hard at times because we've got time constraints. You know, you can't just have an endless unit. It'd be awesome to say to the kids, right, we're going to start this program this unit in MYP1, and we're going to keep fucking doing it for 5 years, because by the end of it, you're going to have the most awesome product that has been bloody refined, and you know the iterations of it. It's got more versions than Police Academy.
We're gonna have a fucking theater full of chairs after you're finished with this, and not one of them is going to last. Except for that last one you make in MYP5.
Exactly.
Like a super Game of Thrones sort of.
And just like Edison's light bulb, you've got a lot of ways not to make a chair.
A lot of broken stuff on the floor. God, imagine trying to sell that to your finance department. So we're going to make 1 million things every year. Cheers. Yes. Budget for that. Oh, that's budget's the whole other episode, I'm sure. All right, so you've decided what you're going to make. You've justified it. You've said this is the best thing because X, Y, and Z. Because I'm making a jewelry project and my boyfriend has said they want a heart necklace, and that's the best idea because I want to keep them happy. Or my teacher said I need to make a chair, so I'm making a 4-legged chair because that's super easy.
I hope it's helped a little bit with A and B, like thinking, you know, we've talked, someone's probably just listened to this, if they're still listening.
They're just shaking their head.
If they're probably thinking, you know what, these two fucking idiots have caused me more questions now than they've actually answered.
Yeah,
but that's good because we've stimulated your design mind, and hopefully you'll tune back in for the next episode where we're going to go through and talk about C and D.
We still haven't done B4.
And how that fits. Haven't we done B4 yet?
We got so stuck on B because it was such a shit show. We haven't done B.
Oh, well, you can just edit that bit and put it at the end because that was fucking cool.
It was good. I enjoyed that. Yeah, I was going to leave you keep going, but all right. So we've decided what we're making. Right. We've justified it. We've decided I'm going to make a podcast, and it's going to be the most awesome podcast. And design specification is perfectly met, 10 out of 10, which has never been in the history of MYP Design. All right, what do we do in B4? What's the point? What's the criteria? We've got to draw something or something.
Well, yes. Basically, the way I like to explain it to kids is you give this to someone else and they should be able to make what it is you're thinking of. It may not be exactly the same. It may have some little... But basically, they should be able to see, understand, and be able to go away and create the product. So
like here's the concept, and here's like the must-haves. But there might be some very...
This is the architect's finished with the designs. This is the stage where after this he gives it to the builder.
And the builder goes, "Fuck, it's this guy fucking architect."
Yeah. What was he smoking when he fucking drew this up?
Fucking Frank Geary all over this again, balling up bits of paper. And he hasn't even talked to the engineer. Yeah. So you give it to the engineer, you give it to the builder, you give it to whoever, and they make it. And this is your design. Yes. This is what you should, if you were talking about professional design, this is what they show to the client. This is the final render. This is what you're going to pay me to build, to design. Yeah. Yeah. And it's also, you know, you can have your, as a part of this, you can have your digital mock-ups, like your CAD drawings in here as well. Yeah, and even going back to the digital stuff, like if you're making a digital product, like an app, a website, this is where you've got your wireframe diagrams. This is where you've got like your flow charts of like how things work in robotics, and maybe your block programming if you're doing some simple sort of stuff like that.
That's it. And you might have jumped on your Microsoft Paint and whipped up some, you know, very primitive screenshot type.
Do they even have Microsoft Paint anymore?
Images. They do.
Is that still a thing? Okay.
Due to copyright, I won't say who, but there's a great guy on YouTube that does some really cool animation, and he uses Microsoft Paint. So it's one of those things, right? Like, just because something looks simple doesn't mean it's not awesome. I'm not saying I'm not saying Microsoft Paint's awesome, but I am saying it can do cool things.
That's an important point for next episode, talking about tools, equipment, resources. You can do anything you want. There's no limit to what you can actually do with very simple tools. All right, so we've got a drawing, or in this case, we've got an Excel spreadsheet of what we want to do in a podcast, and hopefully we've solved the problem.
Yeah, and that's the other beauty of using like CAD programs like Fusion, things like that, where particularly for product design and materials, you can do it on there and it breaks it all apart for you to give you a cut list.
You've got to have all the equipment, resources and stuff like that in your final drawing as well. People just go, here's my drawing. And then you go, what's it made from? And they go, wood, obviously. And you go, it's a black and white drawing. How am I supposed to know that? Get some labels, get some building materials, get a cutting list on.
Yeah, and that's where sometimes going back to B2 and design ideas, really getting the kids in the habit of annotating. You can't have too much information on it. Like a sketch, it doesn't need to look pretty. You just need to understand.
As I said, like this whole criteria section, it's all about communication. You know, once you get the point across, you've drawn a stick figure. Okay, you don't need to do this full anthropometrically accurate drawing of a person or a hand or something like that. You've got a stick figure, and you've got something on top of them, or your table, your chair is drawn to an appropriate scale. It makes sense. It communicates the idea. That's all we need.
That's it. And so, if when we go back to talking about making design enjoyable, and it's not a writing subject. When you look at this criteria, maybe you've got 8 or 10 dot points as your specifications, and maybe you've got 3 or 4 sentences justifying your design idea, and that's all the writing you need for this criteria.
You're in your 3 or 4 sentences, you've referenced all 12 of those specification points because you've either said meets all specification points, or you've gone and you've coded them like meet specification point 1.1, 1.2. You've just gone.
Yeah, and you've talked about your skills and the resources, and it's just about getting smart. And if you want to talk about it, do a recording. Yeah,
well, like inclusion in design. You talk about it's the fun subject. It's the one you want people to enjoy. If you've normally got kids who've come out of, say, let's say 5 other subjects where they've had to write in maybe their second language for a lot of the time, or think in a different language. You don't want to bombard them with more vocabulary and writing if you don't have to.
And that's it. And I guess that's one of the other things we need to make. When we're talking about what we do, we're not actually in schools that do the e-assessment.
Yeah, true. Yeah, there's certain requirements. Well, obviously, if you're talking about MYP5's e-assessment, that's a whole different kettle of fish.
We've got the luxury of, if kids want to record and present a lot of their stuff through audio, they can. So my advice, if your school does e-assessment, I would just make sure you're very clear on what the requirements are for that portfolio unit that you have to send off for the e-assessment for design.
Congratulations on making it through the first Learning Factory podcast. They get better, I promise.
Yes.
Or maybe they don't. Ooh, who knows? All right.
Join us next week, and we'll get through B and C, and maybe we might even elaborate a little bit on our own journeys, what we've been doing, and what we do in design at the moment, because we haven't really mentioned that either. So, yeah, if you come back, congratulations.
You have been listening to The Learning Factory. Thank you for your attention. End of recording.